Welcome, Johnny Chang.
How you doing?
All right, all right. I'm Cavario, aka the Mind Plug,
For sure.
and yeah, it's a pleasure to have you on the show, man. On VladTV, I watched pretty much every interview that there is so far on you, and we're about to surpass all of them. They're
Yeah.
good. This was gonna be great.
Yeah, for sure.
So I understand you were born in East LA, California in 1989.
Yeah, yeah,
All right. You were born to Korean-born parents,
yeah.
and you had a troublesome household. I want you to elaborate on that. So I won't break any of that down. I'll leave that up to you. All right. So you were born in LA, though your parents were born in Korea.
Right, right.
And although your parents are born in Korea, you're Chinese.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, I'm very interested in how that works. And so regardless of where you are in the world, or where you're from in the world, you have a family, and then if you have a family, not everybody has a family, but if you have a family, then they are your foundation. Meaning, whatever choices you're inclined to make as you grow older, they will be founded in the ideas and examples given to you.
Right.
That said, what was your family dynamic like?
So my it was very traditional Chinese. My parents were born in Korea, but originally ethnically were Chinese, right? So my grandparents from both sides, they fled the communism in China, and Korea. So where we're from is a northern region of China, and they fled over to Korea, which is like a boat ride over, basically. So yeah, the dynamic of my family was again very traditional Chinese. Father was a dictator, mother was kind of very submissive, and my dad didn't believe in like Buddhism or anything. My mom was Buddhist though, so again, she believed in karma, she believed in serving, she believed in being putting good energy out there and receiving good energy back. So she kind of just stuck through everything, with my dad. My father was abusive. Like a dictator almost, and very he was an alcoholic. Yeah. Mhm.
Um, being born, raised by alcoholics, um, has a particular type of impact on young people. Profound impact usually. They usually either develop um, alcoholism themselves, or they forego the alcohol and just take on the behaviors. Did you struggle with any of that? Did you struggle with drinking, or if not, did you struggle with the behavior that you learned from your father?
I would say I struggled with the behavior. I really didn't like the alcohol, the taste of alcohol, all of that, and just I remember the smell of it, and even like the smell of throw up. Like I would remember
Oh,
that. So that kind of deterred me from really drinking. Like I drank when I was with the homies as I got older, but I was never really, I would say, an alcoholic. But yeah, the trauma that came from the abuse stemming from the alcoholism, definitely. Like I had a hair trigger, like hairpin anger. I'd go from zero to
yeah.
100. I kind of cultivated that mindset of like just like handling things through violence, rather than speaking. I didn't really like to talk much actually, prior to growing a little older. When I was younger, I was just like always fighting, didn't know how to express myself, angry all the time, empty all the time, frustrated all the time. So yeah.
When you say empty all the time, what do you mean by that?
I always felt like I was inadequate. I remember feeling this like at the age of 11. I just didn't really, I felt like I was a failure before my life even started, if that's like the best way to put it. I couldn't, I don't know, I just felt like I couldn't function correctly. Like I was always the odd one out. And I felt like no matter what I did, like I wasn't really happy. Like most kids at 11, 12 years old, they're worried about, I don't know, Pokemon and Pogs and stuff like that. I wasn't worried. None of that made me happy. I couldn't really have fun, and it wasn't until I found my street, my neighborhood, my gang, that I started to feel a little more like that adrenaline rush, and I felt more alive in that aspect when I was doing those like criminal activities.
Hmm. Yeah, I can dig it.
Mm.
Um, the inadequacy. I mean, at 11 years old, inadequacy is a pretty sophisticated type of emotion to experience.
Mm.
Um, when you said you felt inadequate, um, I mean, you grew up, as I understand, you grew up poor in the projects,
Mhm.
all right?
Mhm.
So you didn't have much, but most of the people in your environment didn't have much either, all
Right.
right?
Right.
So when you said you felt inadequate, what is it that you felt that you were insufficient for? What did you feel that you didn't have, weren't enough for?
I just felt like this, like, well, first off, like a lot of the parents around, like a lot of my friends, I grew up with a lot of Hispanics, right? So a lot of their parents were kind of pretty like loving. Like the mom was very loving towards the kids. The father was kind of similar to my father, but I felt like my mom and my dad both just weren't in my life, even though they were there. I didn't feel like they
Uh-huh.
were actually there. You know what I mean? And I couldn't open up to them about anything. Like, there's a time where I got jumped, and I wasn't able to really like open up to my dad about that. I tried to, told him that, they stole my backpack, they stole my shoes, I got beat up. And because of the cultural difference, like he couldn't understand why little kids would be doing this to little kids, basically, because he's from Korea.
Yeah,
There's like bullying, but it wasn't nothing crazy like that, and he didn't understand the gang culture, the dynamic of gangs. He understood that there was gangs, but he didn't know how they operated. He just basically didn't understand that. And so I always felt like nobody understood me, even though I was around these types of people. Like we were different culturally because I was Chinese and they were, Hispanic. And then it was just like, I think it was just a mixture of all of those things. I just remember feeling like this pressure in my chest, like not being happy at all and seeing other people and getting envious too. Like I was jealous all the time of seeing other kids have stuff, even if it was like, I don't know, I would get Payless shoes and some of the kids would get, I don't know, Nikes, and I would get mad about that. And I was like, that's not normal. And I remember people calling me out on that too. Like, yo, why are you
really.
so mad? Like it's not a big deal. But I just couldn't take it.
So
Yeah.
that's how inadequacy it manifests.
Right.
That's what haters is about.
Yeah.
Haters is about
Right.
they don't feel like they're sufficient for the world. Period. It's a heavy feeling for an adolescent to experience, a prepubescent adolescent to that. Like it's really some heavy shit.
Yeah.
So psychologically and emotionally, you started out early dealing with some issues that it doesn't seem you had any um, outlet for. You couldn't talk to the people closest to you. You had a mother and a father. I understand that you also had a brother,
Mhm.
older brother.
Yeah.
What was the dynamic like between you and he?
We didn't like each other. So my brother was actually a good kid. He tried to listen to my parents. He wouldn't run away when he would get beat and stuff like that. He was actually a real like loving kind of kid. And how he changed was he started getting bullied like after around like high school. Like freshman year of high school. So that's when he kind of changed. But me and him, I always felt like I couldn't relate to him. Like we just hated each other so much. And I was a kid who would always be getting in trouble. Like even at the age of 5, 6 years old, I was like a straight kleptomaniac. I would steal all the time. And my brother would be the one be like, "Why are you doing this?" Like I felt like that judgment towards him, even as a young age. I didn't know that was judge. I just didn't like him telling me what to do. So I naturally had an issue with authority as a kid. And he wasn't. He was very submissive as a kid. He was the firstborn, which is he's the older brother. So he actually got a lot of attention, and I was taught that no matter what, I have to respect him, even though he's only 18, 19 months older than me. I can't
Mhm.
call him by his first name. I got to call him by like big bro. In Mandarin, it's like daga, which means big brother. If I call him by his name, I could get beat for that. I mean, and then on top of that, when I would fight with him, he could say whatever he wants because he's older, more mature. But if I say something back to him, I'm gonna get in trouble for that. So I always had that kind of jealousy towards him too. Like, man, you could do whatever you want, and I got to sit here and try to be a good person, and just like be a submissive person and listen to you. And I just didn't. I went against all of that, and I got disciplined a lot by my parents because of that.
That definitely would contribute to inadequacy issues even further, man. I mean, being told that you're basically lesser than because you're younger than is
Right.
kind of ridiculous. You know, that is something that I'm sure you've assimilated enough with, with cultures outside of your ethnic culture to know that that's not a common dynamic. Like, all that he's the older brother and all of whatever. I mean, there's a certain regard that you have to have, but not being able to call them by their name and, having to just take whatever they throw at you and there be no kind of checks and balances.
Right.
That's something that's very much particular to, I guess maybe Asian culture in general, maybe
Absolutely.
Chinese culture in particular.
Absolutely.
But it's like that's a lot to manage, man. Um, when you began to you started stealing 5, 6. Um, when you began to move towards more serious antisocial behavior, how old were you?
I would say like I stole up until about like 10 and 11. And then when I got jumped, like I started to kind of fight a lot more during that time. So I feel like the more I fought, it was weird. It was like antisocial, but also it brought me a lot of like a different type of crowd. You know what I mean? Like I guess it pushed me into like not hanging out with people, but like it pushed me into the gang, like people who were like me, knuckleheads, troublemakers, same way, whereas when I was just stealing, nobody like nobody wants a thief around them, you know what I mean?
Right.
So but when I
Precisely.
started fighting and it kind of gave me the dynamic of my life kind of shifted when they were like, oh, okay, this guy got hands, and he's willing to fight, and it just attracted a whole bunch of different people.
Right, right. Um, that's a lot to manage at 12 years old, trying to figure that out. So you got jumped um around the 12-year
Mhm.
mark,
Right.
right? Um, I know you've talked about this a lot, but I'd like to, I'd like to hear that. I'd like to hear about exactly how that went down.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, so I was coming home from Monterey Highlands. It's like this like middle school, and I was going back to the house or to the apartments. And when I was walking, this I remember this hatchback Civic pulled up on me, and it was a group of gang members basically, and they were
Well,
kids. They were young, and
like how young?
I would say like a little older than me, so probably anywhere from like 12 to 15, 16, maybe 16 years old. I would say probably the oldest one. Um, Maybe 17, I don't know. But around that, like, yeah, around that age range. So they jumped
Yeah.
out. The guy who was driving didn't do anything. There was actually five of them, but four of them hopped out, and they were the youngsters, and they hit me up. They're like, "Oh, where you from?" And at this time, I didn't really know what that meant. I was just like, what?" Like, and then I just feel somebody just like punch me on the side of the head, and I'm like, that's the first time I got rocked. Like, I'd never felt that. I was just like stars and all that, and then yeah, next thing you know, they're beating on me and they're taking all my stuff and taking my shoes. And it wasn't like I had nice shoes or anything. It was just beating me up. And I realized that they jumped me not because I was Asian, but it was more like of a that's just the thing to do back then. Like in the San Gabriel Valley, when you're a gang member, you kind of have to put in work. So they just did stuff like that, beat up on kids and stuff like that. And yeah, they just beat me up just cause, honestly, and took all my stuff. And I just remember like feeling more afraid of going home after that because I just felt like my parents didn't trust me because I stole so much, because I was such a knucklehead, because I wasn't doing good in school, that I'm like, man, getting beat up was okay, but like now going home and having to explain it. I wanted to tell my mom, and I wanted to tell my mom not to tell my dad, but being our culture, she had to let my dad know. But the crazy thing is when I opened the door, my dad was there. So I was like, oh, I can't. And he had seen no backpack, no shoes. He's like, where's all your stuff? And I was like, all right, dad, like I got beat up. I didn't even there's no word for getting jumped. I just said there's four kids hopped down, beat me up. And he was like, when are you gonna stop lying to me? That was the first thing that came out. Yeah. And then I was like, I'm not lying, you know? And then he's like, I'm going to teach you today. Like, I'm going to break that out of you today. And I was just like, and then he dragged me into the room and he beat my ass. And after that, you know, I really felt like I could not trust my family anymore. Like I couldn't trust my mom. I definitely couldn't trust my dad. I was already like hating on my dad, but being that I was that young, I had nowhere else to go. And so from then on was when I started to run out on the streets more. Like I would stay out super long, like the best that I could, and as long as I could, so that I don't have to be home, you know?
So I mean, the guys who jumped out on it, they weren't Asian, were they?
No, they were Mexican. Yeah, they're
Mexican.
Hispanics. Yeah.
The projects that you grew up in, what were those projects?
So I originally came from Ramona Gardens, and then from Ramona Gardens, I moved to Rose Hill, which is in El Sereno. So I kind of hopped around a lot of projects. Then Rose Hill went to Ramona Gardens. It's like an apartment complex offshoot of the actual Ramona Gardens. Yeah, in East LA. Yeah.
And that's where that initial situation took place.
Yeah, it happened in Monterey Park, which was the second part. Yeah.
It's crazy. I was just in Monterey Park. Yeah, I was just in Monterey Park. I was staying at the new hotel out there. It's nice out there.
Yeah, it's nice now. Yeah.
So I mean, wow, you're dealing with a lot at this point. You know, the cultural differences from ethnicity to ethnicity is one thing, but the social subculture, that's a whole nother thing. It's a whole nother world to navigate. And then you're from a home where it basically doesn't even exist. So when you show up after having been assaulted and robbed, you don't have enough evidence on your physical, like you don't have enough bruises or scratches or whatever for him to, where like what he thought you beat yourself up or something.
I mean, I think he knew I got into a fight, but I feel like he probably thought I was like exaggerating. And I was a kid who didn't express well. Like I said, I didn't really talk much. Now I'm learning to kind of, you know, but I would just be like most kids, like I got beat up. Like it was just, there was not, you know, who beat you up? 4 people. Like it was just very like one word type of thing. And he just hated that too. Cause he would be like, you're dumb. Like you don't know how to like express yourself. And that's cause you don't go to school and this and that, you know? So, yeah, it was like that.
Wow. San Gabriel Valley, that's where you grew up, right? What was San Gabriel Valley like? And I would guess, I mean, if you were born in 89, this is now like 2000, 2001 that you're dealing with it.
Yeah.
What was it like in general, or in your neighborhood?
It was pretty chaotic back then. It was kind of like the tail end of the gangbanging era, I would say. Like late 90s, early 2000s was when it was still kind of cracking, you know? And yeah, it was crazy. Like I would see people get beat up. I would see robberies happen, you know, residential burglaries. Like there was a lot of, you know, a lot of this crime that went kind of hush hush because a lot of the Asian gangs were very tight-lipped, very incognito. And our people, we don't really like snitch. We don't really like call the cops because of the distrust that we have from immigrant countries like Vietnam, where there's communism, like China, where there's communism. Anywhere there's communism, you can't trust the officials to protect you. So you kind of have to, you cultivate this mindset, right? So my dad and my mom too, they never called the police no matter what. And yeah, I would see gang members, you know, rolling up with the Jinko pants and the, you know, like parachute pants, super baggy, and, you know, the just slick back hair. I mean, it was just a whole bunch of gang banging. And I think that kind of took over all, not just the San Gabriel Valley, but like everywhere at that time, you know, in LA, it was just crazy everywhere, you know? So, yeah, it was kind of like that.
So when you got involved, before we go there, how exactly, I mean, you got assaulted, you're not getting any real support at home.
Right.
So, you fall to something, it makes sense that you would. Um, how exactly does a kid coming from the dynamics that you come from, um, how does he get actually in a gang? Like,
Mhm.
how does a gang come up?
Yeah. So the gangs usually will hit you up, right? They roll up on you back in the day. Nowadays, it's not so much, but the dynamic back then was if you look like somebody, if you had Cortezes, for example, or a bald head, or if you just dressed the part, which everybody did, like
Because it was
you
fashion.
right. And they would just hit you up. Like, where you from? Do you gang bang? Are you from this hood, that hood? Sometimes they just roll up on you and say, F this neighborhood and see if you're from there, right? If you're from there, you'll feel disrespected. You'll say something. The way I got hit up was they pulled up on me when I was walking home again. And they pulled the strap on me and they said, where you from? And I froze like, oh shoot. And I was like, I don't gang bang. And that's what I said. And they were like, all right, if you don't gangbang, then this is whatever, whatever. And they were, talking about representing their hood. And then after that, they're like, the guy in the shotgun was like, you want to kick it? Like, and I was like, yeah, I'm down, So they hopped out, pulled the seat, and then I went in the back, and then we started just chopping it up. What's your name? What do they call you? This and this and that, and kind of just joking around, but was like, you know,
Feeling you out.
yeah, filling me out. And after that, they were like, okay, he's pretty cool, like, and he took. So I went to go meet like the older homies, right? At that time, people who were older, another generation above me, and those guys were actually very respectful. They were like, "Oh, what's up, man?" Took me out to eat. I don't know. I felt loved. I was like, "Man, that's cool." We ate at that NBC Seafood, which all the San Gabriel Valley people know where that's at. It's like a really good Chinese food spot. And
Mhm.
we had it family style, which was like they just ordered plates and everybody was eating. And I was like, man, this feels like home, and I just remember immediately I was attached. Like that first after that day, I was like, I want to kick it with them every day, every time. And it was just in my mind, like, these guys are good people. Like, yeah, they rolled up on me, but that's part of the life, and they had money, they had, cars, they had guns, they had power. And I need that, and that's what really attracted me to them. And because of that, I kind of knew my position, like, okay, these people are talking about, if you fight somebody, you just gotta, like, if they disrespect you, just fight them, and I'm like, okay, I could do that. I've been doing that. So it just kind of fell all into my lap. It was perfect for me at the time.
It's interesting. You said their treatment of you felt like home.
Hmm.
It's interesting because the home that you described didn't sound like that.
Right.
So when you say it felt like home, what do you mean? Like what point of reference did you have for um anything other than what you were going through at home? Like,
I think just the love, like, I didn't really feel a lot of love. So I felt like maybe this is what, I guess to rephrase it would be like, this is what it feels like to be loved.
mm,
And I felt that. I was like, whatever this feeling was, like whether it was love or home, I need that. Like I needed this because this
right,
was that first time I felt something where I was acknowledged, I was exalted, I was provided for. You know what I'm saying? And not to say that they
protected,
didn't. Right, exactly. I felt accepted for who I was, and I could just be myself. Even when they was cracking jokes, I was like, man, this is cool. I'll crack jokes, and then it was like that flow of exchange. And I didn't have that. I couldn't express myself to my dad. If I said one thing, it would get cut. So that's why I was always just keeping things short. Are you hungry? Yes. What do you want to eat? Food. Like it was just I couldn't exchange. Whereas with them, I was like, was you scared? Yeah, I was. I ain't go, okay, cool. And then we were able to chop it up and just kind of free flow. With them, I just couldn't. And I think I was just able to open my heart to these people. Whereas with my parents, even though they're my guardians, I had that limit of like what I can and can't say to these people.
right, right. Um, the the dynamic of these young people accepting you and taking you in and making you feel like you belonged and that you were wanted. You know what I'm saying? That Do you think that a lot of kids in your neighborhood, in your generation, you think a lot of them were drawn to those situations because of that same type of thing?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Wow.
All my homies who grew up, even people who weren't from gangs, they all resonate with what I say. The father was like a brick wall, couldn't get through to him. It's very prevalent in Asian households. And when I got locked up, it was also very prevalent with Hispanic households that I didn't know, but it was the same way. It was like that machismo type of feel where it's like bravado, and a man is a man no matter what. So that resonates with everybody I know in my neighborhood and people, just Asians in general, whether they're from New York, whether whatever, like, so yeah.
What type of things did you get into? Like, what was a day? What was a day with your what was the name of your organization?
So my hood is Wah Ching, and I'm from a side called Oceanside. So Oceanside is not Oceanside, like San Diego. It's named after our head, right? So Oceanside, basically. So I'm from OS, and but watching is kind of like a umbrella, right? It has many different sets, or we call them sides. So I'm from OS, and yeah, yeah,
So, Wah Ching, it means Chinese youth.
yeah,
Is that
yeah,
the meaning? Yeah.
absolutely, yeah,
That's pretty straightforward.
right,
That lets you know what we're looking for.
yeah, yeah,
So the thing about Chinese or Asian criminal culture, I'm from New York, I'm from Harlem, um, and I'm from an organized crime background, right? So I grew up in it, and so I was exposed to um, in the '70s. I was exposed to an expanded criminal world. So I knew Jewish um, gangsters, Spanish gangsters, and when I got to high school, I met Chinese gangsters and gangsters, not gangbangers,
mm,
right? And it- there was a discernible difference between the Chinese gangsters and everybody else. One thing for sure was they were very, very close knit and did not really communicate or talk outside of their group. So even the cops couldn't circumvent them. There was, like there was no getting them to tell that type of shit, whatever, because they had a different type of mechanism for control. All
right,
right, like they could say, well, your people back home are going to be they're going something going to happen to them if you do something over here that's out of pocket, shit like that. Um, the gang culture in San Francisco, from what I understand, was started in like 1964, well before your time.
right,
And I mean, mostly immigrants from Hong Kong and China and stuff like that, right?
yes,
So there was a lot of history. By the time you came along, you had um, the gambling establishments like Hop Sing Tong and shit like that in Chinatown. You had some serious shit going on. I remember when big shit Golden Dragon Golden Dragon massacre.
mm,
You know and was that the Ching Chung Ching Yi and Joe Boys,
mm,
right? Um, when I bring this up to say that when I was growing up in that environment, I know your family doesn't, it started with you or maybe your older brother. I don't know. We get around to whether he was running around or not, but the in my world, uh, I was made to be aware of the history that had taken place before me, right? Um, which made it more of a priority. It wasn't just a thing to be doing. It was like, this is a mantle being handed to you, and you are responsible for protecting and maintaining this for those who might follow you, like it was maintained by those who came before you.
Right.
And that's what my parents taught me. And that enabled me to be effective in my criminality.
Right.
Right. Um, how did how did you fare without having any kind of understanding of what took place, in the 20s, 30 some odd years almost that prior to you even coming into existence? You know, how did you, what did you know about the culture? At all
Right.
when you got involved?
When I got involved, nothing. I just knew that they were pretty powerful back then. Just the general surface level things, like they were, extorting people and, murdering people and stuff. But I didn't know how deep it really went. Being 12, I think even if they explained it to me, I didn't have the mental capacity to understand. I
Right, to
was
put in the
just
context.
there because I felt like that was my family. And
Right.
so I was there really for like, and of course they started to explain the dynamics as I got into it, what happened back in the day, how the big homies are no longer the big homies because we're kind of separated. We're down in, Southern California, that's Northern California. The way they function was more mafioso status, more organized,
Yep.
and the way that we functioned was more like a criminal street gang. And
Yeah.
that was kind of my generation's fault, to be honest. Like, and we a lot of that kind of disconnected. They disconnected from us because of that. We became more of a like lower tier, if you will. Looked down upon, at
Mhm.
least in their eyes. But we were doing the most craziest things because of that. We were making a name for ourselves. We were, doing just crazy things. But yeah, I kind of assimilated to that better because I don't feel like I could have been a mafioso. Like I was more like had too much hate in my heart, very impulsive, straight knucklehead. I don't think people would end up in YA if they weren't this way. I was 12 years old, ended up in California Youth Authority, which is the worst of the worst for juvenile wards, juvenile offenders. So um I just was always kind of like a foot soldier, if anything, but yeah, our OGs taught us really well. They were able to teach us that you still, some of the core values were still there, like not snitching, not, telling on anybody, staying solid, meaning no matter how many people there are, you have to kind of represent. And also they taught us how to make money too, which was very helpful, beneficial to us in that way. But in terms of like having the mafia dynamic, like there's some of there, like you had mentioned, there's gangsters, there's gang bangers, there's gang members, right? There's like, so it's just there's different tiers of people, and so yeah, I mean
What's the
that
difference?
what's the difference?
Yeah,
Gang
between
mem
those three that you just called
So
off.
gang members are just people who kind of roll. They're just like there to kind of ride the coattail and stuff. And no disrespect to them. I mean, they're still in the gang. They just don't really put in work. Gang bangers are the ones who are actually out there, like the knuckleheads, the shooters, the drillers, or whatever they call them nowadays, right? The active ones. And then then there's like the hustlers, right? The people who just make money for the organization. There's that too. So there's some people who could, a gang, you don't have to just all be a bunch of knuckleheads because the gang probably wouldn't last long, right? Everybody would get locked up, which was what was happening in my generation. So there's people who make money for the gang. There's people who bring things, opportunities to the gang. There's so many dynamics, but those are the three differences.
Um, the the history of the stuff that you got involved with was when, as you got more involved, was there any kind of emphasis on being hip to what it was that you were participating in? Was like were escalating levels of criminality and stuff like that, or just like we were just running around in a circle doing a bunch of crazy shit until you got
Honestly,
caught?
the younger generation is always doing just crazy stuff. Like we're all impulsive. Whatever we feel at the moment is going to happen. So our day to day was always different, which I think contributed to the allure of staying in the gang because you don't know what's going to happen every day. And that, although it's kind of scary, brings a lot of excitement, brings a lot of like, all right, what's gonna happen today? You know, we could just be kicking it with people and hanging out all day just doing drugs, or we could actually go and hit a lick. I mean, it just really depends. It ranged from all types of different things, you know. And yeah, our gang was like known to kind of go out and just bang on people. You know, that's what we were known for. Like we just had a lot of it's a bunch of empty souls with a lot of anger and rage and very, very frustrated at everything, you know. So we had to vent that somehow, whether it was fighting, whether it was, you know, stabbing, whatever, all that stuff. So yeah.
Okay. Um, so you guys, your offshoot of the Wah Ching, established in the was established is established in in Southern California, as opposed to the Joe Boys and all being I mean, one of the well that was it. You guys don't descend from the Joe Boys, right? You guys descend from um well, it was watching. It
Mhm.
was the watching initially then,
Yes.
back in on Northern California.
Yeah, it was always
And
watching.
then
Yeah.
okay. And then after the dragon the dragon joint, the shooting up in there where nothing but civilians got hit, people sitting there eating, got all shot up and shit.
Mhm.
Um um none of the watching were hurt. And then um the Joe Boys, they got retaliated on, even though they didn't hit any actual gang members. And then it was something to do with people going in and desecrating the graves of Joe Boys and stuff like that, all kinds of crazy shit. And then from what I understand, that's when the Wah Ching, like mid-60s, Wah Ching established themselves where you became part of it in Southern California. And there was a guy uh, that was recruited, and during that time, Joe Young.
Mhm.
He later became the leader of the Southern California Wah Ching in the 1980s, up until around the mid 90s. So um, I would guess still before, because it was mid 90s, he was operating up into the mid 90s. So you weren't around for that. Was he a name? Like, you know, in my culture, there are names that resonate. It doesn't matter really where they're from. They have hit a certain plateau that makes them universally known to people who participate in the life. Did you guys hear about Joe Young?
So those types of things I can't speak on. But basically, I mean, I've heard of that name, but I can't speak in any more detail into that. You
I dig it.
know?
I I overstand. Trust.
Mm.
but that's how through Joe Young, I can speak on it. Like I said, through Joe Young, that's how the watching became established, but in Southern California and in the Los Angeles and the San Gabriel Valley, right?
Mm.
Um, so I've seen, like I said, I think pretty much all of your interviews. And in your interviews, I noticed that the ones that you did with the other Asian brothers, um, they seem to be very politically astute and careful. So they didn't touch on certain things that might have seemed like obvious follow-up questions or certain responses you gave. They too, some of them at least, were participating around the same time you were participating. Um, and in these interviews, and the soft white, soft white underbelly, or something like that. You talked about catching a situation, inevitably catching the situation, and then ultimately ended up going to, I guess, doing your first bid,
Mhm.
your first little bid. And did your first little bid, it took place before YA? It's like you went somewhere else, you went somewhere, then you ended up in YA because you did something in the lockup you were in. Is that right?
So that was actually YA. SRCC is
Okay.
a reception center, meaning like a holding station. And when I fought there, that's you're supposed to be on your best behavior and reception, because if you don't, if you're a knucklehead, then they're gonna be like, okay, we're gonna place this dude with the knuckleheads, right? If you're somebody who's chill, you could go to different, spots. But I was fighting there, and then that was still all part of YA, and that was still part of my first stretch, first bid.
Hey, yeah, so what led to you getting your first case, and ultimately your first bid?
So yeah, we were just, robbing somebody, and it turned into like a robbery slash kidnapping, because we did take the person. And then it was a
How'd
group.
that happen?
Oh, it just, like I said, it was off impulse. One of the dudes was like, I know this guy who has money, let's make some money. There was like four of us. So we were like, yeah, let's do it, and we didn't think too deep about it. I think he was selling drugs at the time. So we were like, well, if we rob a drug dealer, then all his money that he's making, it'll become ours. Right? Real simple surface level thinking. And yeah, ended up, doing it, going through with it, catching this dude basically, kind of lured him out, and
How so?
robbed him.
How
Uh,
old were y'all, first of all?
I was 12.
How old?
Yeah,
Ah,
I was 12.
okay.
Everyone else was
So you,
around
so you
like
12 on it.
like 16, so like something like that, teens.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
Got you.
and
So you were 12 years old on a mission for a robbery slash kidnapping.
yeah,
And so it started out as a robbery.
yes.
And so how did it evolve or devolve, as it were, to a kidnapping? That's a whole nother level of crime, which
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
pretty sure you didn't know at the time.
yeah. We
Yeah.
were gonna. Well, he had stuff at his house, and I guess he had brought just certain things with him in his car.
Oh,
So then we
oh,
took him into the car, and we forced him into, and that technically is a kidnapping. So,
yes, it is.
right. So, and we didn't know that. We was just like, bring us to the house. We're all like, you know what I mean? And yeah. So they ended up basically snitching on us, and me being the youngest
Who, the
one.
victim? The
Yeah,
drug dealer?
yeah, yeah.
That didn't work. That didn't work out the way it was supposed to. Drug
Right.
dealers,
Yeah.
they're supposed to be the perfect victim.
Right.
They can't call the police, and they
Right.
got cash.
Yeah. But he
Was he
just
Asian?
he was, yeah, he was mixed. He was a mixed
Okay.
dude. Yeah, but he had Asian in him. I don't know
So
what else.
was
Yeah.
Asian and Hispanic?
Not Hispanic. I think it was like he might have been like half white or something. I don't know.
Oh,
Yeah, it
mhm.
was different,
Okay.
but yeah, he basically ended up telling, and I think because he had gotten caught for another case or something like that. And I don't know the full details. I just know all of a sudden they showed up. All of us got arrested. I remember,
Any of your compadres, did they, any of them turn?
no, they didn't.
Oh,
They
okay.
were like, since you're the youngest one, like kind of nudged me,
Hmm.
and I was like, all right, bet, and I figured that it was gonna be um just a few months, to be honest with you. I didn't think much. I don't 12 years old, you don't know anything. And they say 4 years, and I was like, what? With the parole date of 2 years, right? So
Hmm.
2 years minimum, basically. And I'm like, dang, I've never been to juvie. Like, this is a place where it's gonna be, and I remember, like, they were bringing up the case of my gang, like these people, murder for hire, extortion, blah, 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 blah. And this is a picture of him, and blah, blah, like just showing all that stuff. And I'm like, dang. And yeah, there's just no remorse, man. I was 12 years old. But at that time, honestly, like there was a lot of kids who were doing crazy things. Like I had a couple friends who were already in YA for juvenile murder. So, they kind of built that up and was like, this kid is a validated kid. He's 12 years old. He participated in a kidnapping. There's like a slap on the wrist is not going to change this kid. It's going to make him into a
Right.
monster. So we need to put him where he needs to go, which is they recommended youth authority. And I was like, I didn't even know what that really was. I was like, okay, whatever. But yeah, after that, I was like, man, that was
Other
crazy.
kids. I'm gonna be with other kids. Okay.
Yeah, basically,
Oh.
I'm gonna go be with the homies, but and I was with the homies, but it was like, man, that was crazy. Yeah, it was crazy.
So tell now this is your first time getting chopped. This is your first conviction. You going in now. you're in here. I'm sure you got some homies in there, whatever. But the difference is, I would imagine, there's probably about 400 black kids, maybe 300 Mexican kids, and then probably a couple of dozen Asian kids.
Yeah, I would say even under double digits, like probably 10 to some places I was at, some cottages I was like seven of us.
So, and I don't imagine they all Wah Ching either.
No, they're not. Yeah.
So I would imagine that some of them was probably opposition.
Yes. A lot
So
of
how
them,
do you?
actually. Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah.
So how do you manage that? How does young Johnny, 12-year-old Johnny, manage this whole new dynamic? Because I would imagine nobody ever told you that if this ever happened, that you'd be locked up and you'd be outnumbered,
Right.
like ridiculously.
Right.
Pretty much you'd find yourself in the same situation you were in initially when you first got involved in the whole thing in the first place.
Right.
Only a more isolated, confined kind of circumstance.
Exactly.
Right.
I had like I said, a lot of our generation has been to prison, so they kind of explained it in a way where, okay, you're going to YA, like whatever you do, represent. That's what I was told. Represent. Try to find some of the homies. They're like trying to figure out where I'm gonna get shipped to, so I would be in constant contact with them. And when I did tell them I was going to Nellis, they were like, okay, cool. Okay, that's a pretty crazy place. So you got to do this, and that. They were trying to like teach me all the time that I had on the phone. But again, it's just like trying to read a book on swimming versus actually jumping in the water. It's completely different, right? So when I get there, there was somebody who laced me up, which means they gave me showed me the ropes, and that I learned a lot from that person, and I was like, man, this is crazy. Like,
were they much older than you?
They were like, I was 12. I think he was 16 or 17 at the time.
Oh.
So not much, but yeah, a little bit, And,
right, but he'd been bitten probably before you had.
Absolutely, yeah.
So now you're in YA. Can you remember your first night in YA?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Describe that.
It was traumatizing. First off, like that's the first time I had to get naked in front of somebody, like another person, and all of this stuff. Lift up your this, bend over, do this. And I was just like so embarrassed. It was just shameful. Like that's the first time I felt shame. I never had to do that, and these are in front of men, like grown correctional officers, and they're very like just angry all the time, like sergeant type of like, like
drill sergeant type.
Yeah, like just like do this, do that. All right, don't F around, man. You guys gotta like just screaming at us. And it was a straight culture shock, like when I went there. And that's when I started to because even up through the court dates, all that, I was okay. But when I was getting transferred, that's when I was like, man, this is the real deal now. Like it started to sink in. And when it sank in, that's when I just felt a little claustrophobic, actually. I felt like the walls was caving in. I felt like, oh, what's going on right now? And then, but the OG homies were like, that'll happen. That's going to happen. That's part of what it is. No matter what, don't cry, don't show fear. Like, keep it solid, basically, because you're representing something bigger than yourself, So, yeah. And then the first night I was there, I had kind of gotten certain looks because in YA, it's more gangbanging. It's not really like political in terms of, there's some politics, but it's not like prison. Prison's a whole nother world. So I had seen some people and I had seen certain, tattoos and, ex-gang members and rival gang members and stuff like that. So I'm like, all right, I know these dudes, they probably gonna come up to me, So in the morning time was when I caught my first fight, go up to, Chow basically. And right then and there, it's just like, what's up, man? Where you from? Oh, and they start banging on you. And I'm just like, oh, I'm from Wah Ching. And then they're like, oh yeah, FY. And we start just like that. And
no, this is another Asian banger. Okay.
Yeah. There's some dude from Asian Boys, which was our biggest rival at the time.
Who's that?
That's some dude from Asian Boys, which was our biggest
Asian
rival.
Boys, yes. Yeah. Wah Ching and Asian Boys have some history.
Yeah.
Very interesting history. So, but now, like, Wah Ching, Asian Boys, y'all are in the system and your numbers are like just not compatible to
Yeah.
the numbers of the other ethnic groups. So, how long does it take you to understand that you need to form some kind of camaraderie with people you would otherwise be trying to hurt?
I mean, in YA, like it was, like I said, different. It seemed like everyone fought each other. It was weird. Like the essays would fight each other, the blacks would fight each other. So it was just, like I said, a lot of gang banging. And of course, there's times where we would fight other races too. But it was really
Mhm.
not like big old riots like that. You know what I mean? Like for example, like the Southern Hispanics would be fighting the Northern Hispanics, but they're all Hispanics. They're all
Right,
Mexicans. So like
right,
same thing, Bloods will be fighting Crips. Like it was just
right,
so
right.
we didn't really war with other people. We was warring with we was called the Asian Pride, but like we was only fighting Asians. Like it was kind of weird, you know what I mean? But that's because we knew about each other. We're not gonna beef it with somebody 10 miles away from our city. We usually beef it with people in our vicinity, right? So
Right.
those dudes, AB, Black Dragon, whatever, all these gangs, they were in our neighborhoods in San Gabriel Valley. So we knew of each other and we would just fight each other. So we never really had to click up in that aspect. Of course, we would stay clicked up just for, the purpose of the politics, but it was a lot of fighting and gangbanging on each other. Yeah.
Um, there were a lot of violent incidents in the Y. I've been hearing about YA for a very, very long time. I've heard some crazy things about YA, man.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, so what were some of the crazier things that, you experienced or witnessed rather? Like, I know that there obviously were assaults and rapes and beatings and shit like that, whatever.
Mhm.
What were, share with us if you're comfortable, some profound experience that you had while in YA,
Yeah. I've,
and
I've,
as far as you can tell, something that may have altered you as a person.
I think like when I heard somebody getting raped, that was really like traumatic. Why was, like I said, the first time for everything. Like first time I seen somebody get turned out, like it was just crazy. Like I've seen people try to like there's like certain shanks in prison like people would make in YA as well. And there was like razor blades and stuff. So I had seen some dude get cut like pretty much like they were trying to cut his neck, but it was more like I guess in the dark. A lot of the stuff happened like at night. So it was like from like cheek to cheek type of thing. They were trying to
Mm,
slit his throat. And I'm like, these are kids. These are not
mm,
just these are kids like my age, 12 to 14, 16, 17, whatever, and they're doing these things. So in my mind, I just that cultivated a mindset of like PTSD at the highest level. Like no matter what, something's gonna happen to you. You don't know if you'll make it out of here. I've witnessed people die too. So but me personally, like for my experience, I just fought a lot. I was lucky enough to, I mean, I've had people try to stab me, but at the same time, like it was just like in the shower one time. But other than that, it wasn't really like crazy, crazy. I never did anything like that. I didn't have to really stab people myself, but it was more just fight. I fought a lot in there. Super crazy.
mm.
Yeah.
You said that somebody tried to stab you in the shower.
Hmm.
So yeah, you're still what, 12 years old at this
Yeah, I was
point?
12. Yeah.
So you're 12 years old, you're in the shower in a institution, and this was what, was this the guy that hit you up on the first morning
No,
that
no,
you were
no.
there?
This was a
So
week after, like week and a half into it. It was another dude, another Asian dude, Vietnamese guy.
right.
Yeah.
So this is somebody you didn't even know
No,
had any encounters with.
no.
So you just in the shower, mind you got their business in love with, just try to stab you.
Yeah. He basically pulled
So
it out and he's like, "What's up, man? Like, my neighborhood." He's like, "I hate
right.
all dubs and this and that." So, and I ain't gonna lie, I was scared, but I remember like, "Do it then." I said that, like, "Do it." And then he was just like, he kind of froze up after that. So it was just like this, like sitting there. And then right after that, the COs made their rounds and he just kind of like
So
put it up to the side type of thing. He I think he hid it in the shower. I don't even know how he pulled it out, but he had it with
right.
him. And I was like, "Oh shoot, I think I'm gonna die." And but it was weird because I was just like, I just said, "Do it, go ahead, do it." Like whatever. And I was waiting for him. But yeah, I remember feeling that chill, feeling like frozen, feeling that numbness in my hands. Like just, it was a scary thing. It was scary. And I'm thankful that he didn't. Yeah.
Right. Hey, that nervous system kicks in overdrive, that adrenaline starts
Yeah.
kicking in, and the mind starts going places, boy.
Yeah.
Um, how long were you in YA?
4 years.
You spent 4 years in YA.
Yeah. So
So
original parole
what
date.
happened to the 2 years to
Yeah.
its release?
So people who go to YA understand that it's called maxing out, right? There's a term where most people who go to YA, especially Nellis YA, YTS, Chad, all these different really like cracking spots,
Hmm.
they're gonna fight. When you fight, you get written up, and it's called a level B, right? So when you catch these level Bs, it starts to extend your time if you catch too many, right? So at the end of the day, that's what maxing out is. Most people don't make their parole date because of all the fighting and all the craziness and the fact that anyone disrespects you, you got to take off on them. If you don't take off on them, people start labeling you as a bitch, as whatever, So everybody in white, it was crazy. I mean, there was people who got turned out, there was people who rolled it up, and but for the most part, like, everybody, I would say, held their own in some kind of way.
Explain, there will be people who will be watching this and they won't know what rolled it up is. They won't know what turned out is.
Mhm.
Explain those terms as they relate to the experiences you're
So
sharing.
so turned out means to be raped, basically. And then rolling it up means snitching or just piecing up, going to protective custody. Say somebody's trying to stab me, and I go and I just tell the COs this, I'm in, fear for my life, like I need to go, and they'll put you on this part where there's just like, it's the weaker people, basically, the people, the prey, they would say. But rolling it up means basically you roll up everything and you move out of that cottage, you move out of that
Mhm.
cell, you move out of that block, basically. So yeah.
And once a person does that, it's pretty much, that's it. Your time there will be that, because you get introduced back into population and your food,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, your meatloaf for sure. Yeah.
Do cats like, have you ever seen cats do that, go through either of those experiences, and then later on, you see them, back active on the street? You ever run into anybody that?
I've seen that happen. Not so much for our race. I've seen other races do that, to be honest with you. And there's certain, yeah, I'm not gonna name them, but there's certain like YouTubers who do that, who was like, I was this big old this and that, but people don't know you pull their paperwork in their PC. So I mean, and I get it. People are trying to do what they're doing nowadays. I'm not in the politics as much anymore, but stuff like that, I mean, it's really looked down upon if you're from that type of lifestyle. You know what I'm saying?
Fucking A. That's right. That's definitely right. It's interesting how cats act like nobody's around, right?
Right.
Like everybody that was around when you was active or involved, whatever, that they all dead, or they, none of them on YouTube. It's crazy to see
Right.
that, you know.
Yeah.
Um. So when did you become like apprised of the other cultures, the other gang cultures? Like, when did you get to kind of understand that, this gang banging shit was going on in the black community? Again, you got introduced to it by your own experience with the Hispanic community.
Right.
But when did you realize, like, yo, this shit, like, every fucking body's doing this shit? Like,
When I was
were
in
you
YA.
when you were in YA?
Yeah,
That's
that's
a
when
hell of
I
a
met.
time to find that out. Eh?
Yeah, that's when I met my first Crips. I didn't even know what Hoovers was. I met Hoovers. I met Bloods. They broke down the difference between what a Blood was and a Pyru was and a Damu was and all no cut, all this stuff. And I was like, man, this is like so deep. Like, it's not just a color. So I learned all this stuff, and not speaking on them, but basically that's what I learned about all the different cultures.
So okay, you in there, you obviously you're fighting, you're getting caught up in all kinds of stuff, so you end up maxing out. So you do 4 years in there. So you go in at 12, you come out at 16, yeah? Right. And by the time you come out, Who are you? Is there any semblance of the 12-year-old kid that went in there?
Not at all. I think I was a
Yeah.
completely changed person. I was more vengeful. I was more like rageful, you know. And I was kind of scared of myself actually because I felt like I should learn, like not I didn't want to go back there, but it became normal to me to just react off of my anger. And before I thought I had it bad, I was reacting because my dad, but when you're in there, I really fortified this mindset and I didn't even realize it that I had to be like the most craziest, violent person. So that's why within 60 some odd days, just 2 months basically, I was back in prison. And people always ask me, you didn't learn, bro? You did four. Like, that's what I was scared of was like, I don't know. I felt kind of not, I can't say comfortable, but I felt just nothing about that. Like, I guess I didn't think deeply about that, but I was just like, I was very good at putting things out of my mind. You know what I mean? It's as if like I had forgotten all about it. And I was just this like new person who was just crazy all the time and super active, basically. Yeah,
Um, so when you came home, you just went on and doubled down on your activity.
pretty much.
Um, so but now uh, you've been to gladiator school. You're a seasoned criminal
Right.
now. You know. Um, so so much for discouraging you by sending you to YA, right?
Right.
Uh, so now you're back on the street. It's been 4 years. You're 16 years old. You're back on the street. Um, where do you go? Because I don't imagine you going back to the family dynamic that you
Right.
initially explained. So where do you go when you come home?
Yeah, I ran
What's
away
life?
right away. The first day I came, I ran away and I just went to my homie's house. And he was older than me. He had a spot. He was like 21, like 20, 21 years old at the time. And he housed me basically. And I had to go to these community service things. I still had a probation officer and all of that, but that's the only contact I had with my parents was when I was like, oh, I got to come back home real quick because this is the address that I'm, getting released to. I got to be there, do the piss test, all this other stuff, right? So, but other than that, I was running the streets with the homies again.
Same cats you were running with previously.
Definitely, yeah.
So they stepped their game up, or were they still into the knocking heads, or was it more about getting to a bag at this point?
At that point, it was still knocking heads, believe it or not. Yeah,
Really?
it was barely shifting to get into the bag, but it wasn't nothing like like dealing. It was more just more again, still I would say the same thing as robberies and stuff like that. 459s and 211s and stuff like that. Yeah.
459s. Those are codes for different crimes. What's a 459?
459 is a residential burglary.
So that became your thing. With it was like home invasion that became your
Yeah.
thing.
Home invasion is a little bit different. Home invasion is where you go in and actually tie up people and stuff like that. But 459 is just like kind of waiting for people to leave and then jumping in there and rummaging everything and hopping out. But yeah, basically.
So you do that kind of thing in your neighborhood? Like how does one know whom to rob, whose house to go into, whose house is worth the
Yeah,
risk?
it's just anyone who you feel like has money. Like it's always again, it's a hit or miss. You don't make a bag every single time. You take the risk every single time. Penitentiary chances, absolutely,
Yep.
but you don't know. There's times where you could hit somebody who has a safe, and you're like, oh yeah. And sometimes you crack the safe open and you don't really know, like, what's in it, and then you try to be a little better, but again, it's kind of like at that time, like Chinese people were starting to transition to banks, whereas before they didn't keep money in the bank. Like they were keeping it in a safe at the house. They were burying the money. They were, pillowcases, whatever it was. Like so, that was kind of the tail end of it. And then nowadays, I don't know if they still be doing that stuff, but back then that was huge. That was huge in every neighborhood. Like I think every gang was doing stuff like that.
Right. So now when you get out, this thing that you guys have, this well known thing that you guys had with the Asian boys, has has it already started when you touched back down the street?
Absolutely. It started in actually the, what is it, mid 90s, 93,
Hmm.
94. Yeah. Hmm.
So shit, when you came along, it was already popping.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when you get home, what year is this when you get home?
2000 and what, 6?
2006. Okay. So the Wah Ching they had an ongoing conflict with the Asian boys.
Hmm.
Um and so you guys um they were I saw this on a documentary I came across recently prior to uh this even being set up,
Hmm.
about the Asian boys and how they got started, and very similar story to your own, whatever protection and stuff like that. But the Asian boys ended up hooking up with the Vietnamese boys,
Hmm.
all right, the BBZ. So at the point at which you guys are beefing with them, you're dealing with two different groups,
Hmm.
right? Y'all are opposing different groups. So on June 2nd, 2007, An Duc Nguyen,
Hmm.
a member of the Monterey Parkside Wah Ching, shot at 5 people in Westminster's Bowling Green Park, severely injuring one. The shootout was believed to be motivated by the fact that one of the victims changed his MySpace page bio to read Garden Gang. It- 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 are you familiar with that causality? Like, you familiar with how that popped off and got like
I've
that? Like,
I've
did you
heard
know it
of
was
it.
about some bullshit like that?
Yeah, I've heard of it. I mean, I don't really like know the details of it, to be honest, but I've heard of that. Yeah.
So did you have to move with that? Like, you had to represent your group in that altercation or in that beef? Um, in
Yeah.
light of some shit like that, that's what y'all had to.
Yeah, I mean, believe it or not, a lot of that's just part of what it is, if you got to ride together basically, but again, that's pre going to prison, right? Like when you actually go to prison to speak on Asian boys, I have a lot of homies now from Asian boys who are like really tight with me, so that's when I kind of knew that the all this BS, we knew it was BS back then, but
Hmm.
I mean, when you get to, like for example, like when somebody changed their name or like fighting over a female, for example, that was all BS, and a lot of sides knew that because a lot of wars started because of that, but we still had to rock with it just because of the politics back then, right?
Right.
Nowadays, as I've been to prison, a person who's seasoned and done time, and I'm able to see that these people are the same as me. Like all my Asian boy homies, like they're just like me.
Yep.
They grew up in poverty. They grew up, without a father, like a father being there. Some of them didn't actually have a dad, but getting picked on, getting banged on, we all are interconnected with the struggle. So a lot of my homies were, who were in there because there's a lot of Asian boys in prison. There's a lot of watching in prison. So we started to realize like, man, all this stuff is BS, bro. Like it was just, we're all the same. Like you're just on another side, you're representing another team, and I'm representing this team, but we're actually mirror images of each other. We function the same, we move the same, we think the same, we have a lot of the same beliefs and core values. And when we dropped that BS politics, we became family. Like I have homies who are like family to me, who are enemies, enemies technically. Yeah.
Right. Who used to be opposition. So at what point did you and your peers begin to recognize this this bullshit going on? Like, you were still running, you were still banging at the point when y'all started to realize?
No, I think we started realizing after we stopped banging, we started to get money. So the money kind of interconnected us as well because it's like, yeah, I ain't gonna kill you for a name no more. Let's get this bag together. That's number one.
Yeah,
And
that'll do it.
number two, it was prison. People who've been to prison are like this dude, I know he's a op, but he's cool. Like he's, I've had people give me care packages when I was in prison, um, who were enemies. And I'm like, I always felt that was weird. Like when I first came to prison, I was like, dude, this guy's from, Van Nuys Asian Boys or whatever. And it's like, dang, but he just shot me some soups, some, stamps, some, just a care package. And I'm like, man, that's cool. And I started to realize like, oh, they had already in prison, they had already dropped that. It wasn't even like, oh, this Wah Ching's coming in, man. Like there was no real gang banging. You're in a gang, you have to represent your gang, but there's a lot of politics where you can't just be like, all right, you're from this gang, we got to fight. Like, no, it doesn't work like that. If you do stuff like that, it's really looked down upon, and you could get DP'd, which is discipline. Like they will
Whoa.
beat you up for that. Like the whole car will beat you up if they find out that you and the homie caught a fade, like without asking and without, there's like all this politics basically.
Yeah. Explain to people what a car is in this context.
Car is basically just who you ride with, right? So if I'm riding with, just like you ride in a car, you ride with, I ride with the others, right? So others include, Samoan, Chinese, Japanese. It can even include Puerto Rican, Nicaraguan, Native Americans, Polynesians. Like, so it's just the other car, and
Mhm.
essays roll with whoever they roll with, and blacks roll with whoever they roll with. But it's a car. It's just a group basically. Yeah.
Um, I'm gonna read something really quickly. So, informants. There was a story I came across. It says, informants help FBI arrest 12 suspected members of gangs. All right, this is in LA Times of January 10th of 2002. The FBI's arrest of 12 suspected members of the notorious Wah Ching gang resulted from a successful effort to develop informants within its ranks, according to court documents. An FBI affidavit filed in Los Angeles federal court in connection with Tuesday's arrests revealed that investigators were able to secretly tape record Wah Ching members and learn of their plans with help of 2 informants. Were you apprised of these happenings? Because you were active during this time, weren't you?
Mhm. I mean, of course, we know what happened during those times. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
it's
so,
all documented. Yeah. Mhm.
right. Were you in proximity to any of these activities when the FBI was getting involved and all that kind of stuff?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you come close? Because obviously you didn't do any federal bids.
Mhm.
Uh, did you come close to any of this
I
where you
knew some of the
might have been
homies who
touched?
were there. I know who got picked up and pinched. Yeah, but I didn't.
The
I wasn't there. Yeah.
homies of yours?
Not from us. Yeah,
Not direct.
yeah.
Mm.
But
Um, how active were you during the time that this was going on?
I was still, doing my thing.
Yeah.
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 Hmm.
How did things like this happening? This is obviously a scale up, way up from, accidentally kidnapping a drug dealer.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, at the point in which this level of activity is going on, um, have you yet begun to question your choices?
I didn't really question my choices. I was just more like, this is kind of what comes with the territory almost. You know what I mean? Like it did knock us on our feet. It was like a break to the face because we didn't understand that Homeland Security and FBI was getting involved now. Right? That's a whole nother level. But
All right.
even then, we had a very like a very different type of mindset. We're like, we got to move forward. I mean, we got to push forward. We'll roll with the punches type of feel. But of course, a lot of us were, some of the people were probably shook. For me personally, I was just like, okay, so I mean, it makes sense. It makes sense what's going on right now.
Mhm.
Why they're
Yeah,
rolling up on us, and we have our hands in a lot of things, and that's kind of comes with the territory.
that's facts. So, you get home, and you're obviously you into you know jokes. You know what I mean? You like juxing, and so you're doing home robberies, but you're doing regular robberies as well. Yeah.
Mhm.
And there was one particular incident that I heard you speak about that definitely had to have been a profound experience for you, but it didn't seem to have a significant impact on your choices most immediately. Uh, an incident that involved a robbery and you and a friend. Can you share that? Would you mind sharing that with us?
Yeah. So, we had planned to hit this well-known drug dealer, and we were gonna rob him for all of his stuff, and so I had planned to go to the right of the car. The homie was supposed to go to the left of the car. When we met up with him, I went to the right, but he stepped in front of me. So then I just naturally went around him, right? And I heard 3 gunshots ring out, right? And I thought actually my homie was shooting at him. And I was like, man, he didn't really give him a chance. Like I remember vividly, like, whoa, this is crazy, And it kind of stopped me in my tracks a little bit. And
Like, I shot this motherfucker. What the fuck you shooting for?
right. It was like that. It was like, yo, like, dang, we gotta at least get the stuff, or whatever. But then car sped off. And then I just seen him and I realized he had gotten shot, actually. So I was
How old were you?
I was at this time, I had just got out of prison. So what, 20 something? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So we gotta go back a bit, but go ahead.
Yeah.
So now your friend who went to the position that in your plan you were supposed to go to, for whatever reason, your friend goes that route.
Yeah.
And in your stead, he's standing there when the guy who obviously saw y'all and got right, hit him up.
Yeah. Yeah. They had a dude in the back, which we didn't know. So the driver was the driver, but there was somebody in the back waiting, like just in case, And
yeah. So that moment, bring us there. Take us to that moment. Your friend is hit. He's on the ground, dead or dying. What is happening with you? What's going on in your mind?
I remember like just the sound of everything, the smell of like the gun. You know what I mean? Like,
The graphite.
Yeah, and the best way to explain it is like it sounded like he had the wind knocked out of him. I don't know how to explain that, but when somebody like falls and from a real high spot or maybe get caught off guard, and it's like this, like it's a very like somebody punched you too hard or something. And he was
grueling.
Like, yeah, and then he started convulsing after that, and I was like, that scared me. I ain't gonna lie. I was like, oh shoot, like this dude he's gonna die. So I'm like trying to help him, but he's like in my arms, and I don't know what to do. I'm just looking at him, and he's just like dying,
Is he able to communicate in any kind of way?
No, it was just like he was just losing his, I don't know, he just was tightened so much. It seemed like all of his muscles were, because I remember like him being like not limp, he was actually like stiff,
Rigid.
Yeah, rigid. And you can't speak nothing when you're like you know what I mean? So yeah, it was,
everything's contracting. Everything is contracting.
And he was in pain. I could see it. I could see it, and it just did something to me where I mean, I ain't gonna lie, I started crying right then and there, But yeah, so I just never like to think about that too much because it gets
I can dig it.
But
I can dig it. I mean, what do you do as this happens? Just you lying, you're in the street. Y'all were not planning on being there longer than it took to take. So here you are now. The Vic is gone, and you and your guy are in the street. And what happens? I mean, he's dying. You're sitting there. You're holding him. When does the police come?
Yeah. Well, I was just sitting there, and I guess apparently somebody had called the cops. They put me down, and then I'm like, help my homie. He got shot, and then I ain't gonna lie, man. The police at the time didn't care. Like, I'll just be real. They was focused on thinking that I shot him. I was like,
did you have a pistol on you?
He had a pistol on him. Yeah.
Did you have one?
I stashed it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then he was just, he was I mean, yeah, it was crazy. So they come, ambulance, whatever, they finally get to him, but he's already just laying there for like a good amount. Like they had put me in the back seat for a while before the ambulance even came, and that really
Mm.
pissed me off, because I
So he
mhm.
bad.
I know I don't know if they could have saved him. I'll be real, but it just was like that. I didn't even care. I was in the back seat. I was like, bro, like you guys gotta help him. And I just started feeling bad. Like, man, like this dude, they just letting him lay there, you know, and didn't even seem like they cared, Because when I looked at him, I was like shook, but it just seemed like the cops were like, yeah, there's another person dying. Like it was very
Mhm.
desensitized to it, And I'm like, damn, like y'all don't see that this dude is dying. Like they're like, yeah, we see it, but I mean, it was almost like too bad. Like you signed up for
No
this,
doubt.
So
No doubt.
yeah, after
No doubt.
that question and
I
all
mean, they
this,
they become desensitized, just like people who participate become desensitized. I mean, how sensitive can you allow yourself to be when you're dealing with circumstances every day that can result in that type of a outcome?
right? That's
You know what I mean?
true.
If you're as sensitive to it as you should be, if you're operating like a normative, humane person, then that means you're not cut out for it. You're too well adjusted to participate in that life. You know what I mean? Um, the So there's a bid between you being released from YA and this incident occurring, this unfortunate thing that occurred with your young friend. This bid, how does that bid come about? And I'm sure
Before,
this is no more YA for you.
yeah, no more
Right.
YA. Yeah. So
Okay.
from during the 67 days that I was out, I had,
Oh,
yeah, I had, you know, shot at somebody again, basically. So, and got caught for
Jo-
that too.
why, Johnny, why do you like getting caught, man? What?
It's
What?
crazy, huh?
So what happened? I mean, how did you get caught? 'Cause at this point, again, I mean, you've been around some uh pretty seasoned types. You know what I mean? Just like your friends were able to tell you prior to you getting a case, that if you were to get a case and you did have to go lay down, that this is what you might expect. You're going to see this happen. You're going to see that happen. You're going to experience this. You're going to get anxiety, all that kind of stuff. So when you get in there, now you have this a whole other level of criminal conversation.
Yeah.
Does this not improve your uh, execution of things?
It does, but I think the one thing I couldn't change was the fact that I trusted myself. My homies would
Mm.
always say, "Bro, you're stubborn. You think you're always right." I would hear this from a lot of my homies because I would argue with them and stuff, and I would never be wrong. So when a person
Uh-huh.
who thinks that they're right all the time, they can't listen. So even though they
That's
were
right.
lacing me up, I was like, "Yeah, y'all got caught. I got caught." I would make excuses. Well, I got caught because I went with y'all. You understand? Like it was never my fault. And so when I was like, man, the homies would tell me like, hey, lay low, big homies, especially like, Johnny, lay low, you just got out. And I'm like, I ain't scared. And like, I just, again, went back to that self-trust again. Right.
Mhm.
And, carried a strap on me, and it was over nothing. It was over a freeway shooting, somebody just staring at me, throwing up gang signs. And I was like, all right, bet. And it just came out of me, that anger, like I said, just, and it was like a freeway shooting type of thing, and
Mm.
um
When
again,
you say freeway shooting, you mean literally on the freeway?
yeah.
So somebody hit you up on a pass by?
So we were coming
It,
down like on the 60, and it was a dude in front of me, and I think he was just driving a little too slow for me. This was road rage before there was road rage was a thing, you know what I mean? So
oh,
um yeah, and I was just like, man, hurry up, dude. And I didn't realize that this dude was a gang member, right? So he went in front, and then when you pass people, you kind of look, you know what I mean?
oh,
And I guess he had seen me looking, and this time I was bald headed and, tats or whatever, had a tank top on. I wasn't as blasted as I was, but you could tell I was a gang member too. So he was just like throwing up his neighborhood. And I was like, all right, so I just grabbed it and did what I had to do. And, it was just like off of impulse. And of course, the car that I was driving was my car. So, which was stupid, and it, like I said, I acted off of just impulse, like a lot of the time, straight knucklehead, straight YA baby, they call it, and, yeah, I was on the run for a little bit, but I ended up getting caught, anyway, so, yeah. And I ended up going back. They brought the whole case. They brought the YA thing. They said, look, this guy just did 4 years. He's from this gang, validated, blah, blah, blah. He's never going to learn. So at first I was facing like, a good amount, like more 20 plus, and then, they pled out. I pled out, but they gave me they dropped it down to 15. And then after that, they were, and then I was like, you know what? Like in my mind, I was like, if they drop it down, like maybe to 12, I'll do it, but then they came back with 10 and I was like, oh, bet 10, like shoot that, so 10, 85%, 8 and some change basically. So I was like, where do I sign? Sign, went right back in. And then again, it hit me again. But this time it wasn't as bad as the YA. It was just more like, okay, I kind of been through this. It was more of an excitement, which is so crazy. I know, like people who don't come from that don't understand. It's like, all right, cool. Like I'm going to be in here and this is the big leagues now. This is like the Harvard, you know what I mean? Like the homie Bart said it at just kidding. He was like,
yeah, sure enough.
This is the Harvard and I laughed so hard because he wasn't wrong about that. I was
thought that was interesting.
So yeah.
It's an interesting reference. Yeah. He popped out of nowhere with that shit. Those are a funny group of guys. I like them guys. So which prison did you go to when you
I did my reception at Lancaster State Prison, and then after that, like 3 months, 90 days there, I went to Ironwood State Prison. It's kind of in Blythe, California, like near the Arizona border. Went right there on a 3-yard, and then from there, Governor came into.
It gets massive hot there, don't it?
It was super hot out there. People were catching.
They get like 110s, 115s and shit.
Yeah, it gets crazy hot where like the soles of your boots would melt touching the asphalt. Yeah.
And you'd be, damn, they got motherfuckers in a box and all that under them circumstances?
Yeah.
God damn. Yeah. Motherfuckers died in the box?
There was some, I think, not on the yard I was at, but there's different yards, but yeah, I heard there was some people dying of heat stroke and heart attacks and all that stuff. I don't know if the heart attacks was stemmed from the heat. I'm sure it contributed.
It will.
Yeah.
Oh, hell yeah.
Right. So,
yeah. So now you are in the big league. You're in penitentiary. This is not youth authority by any stretch of the imagination.
Right.
You are what now? You are 17.
Mm-hmm.
17 years old. And you are in what's the age group? Like this is a penitentiary, so I guess you're as young can be under those circumstances, 17 approaching 18. And then from that point on, it's straight grown man shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I went there like 110 pounds soaking wet. I was little too. Yeah. I mean, I was lanky, but I was skinny. Yeah.
Right. You used the term a few minutes ago. You said I wasn't as blasted as I am now. Mm-hmm. Explain that to people.
So being blasted means having tattoos, like a lot of tattoos, and I'm super tatted now, but back then I just had a lot of patchwork, gang stuff, names, script. So, my neck was just 2 letters, 2 Chinese characters. So yeah, but
badges,
pretty much.
Yeah. So now you're in Lancaster, you're 17 years old, you weigh 110 pounds. And this is, what kind of a population does a penitentiary like that have? How many incarcerated citizens?
I think at that time it was only like a little above 2,000. I don't know about
2,000.
No. Yeah.
All right. So what would the Asian population of a prison population consisting of 2,000 people be like?
On my yard, but that's reception again. So I wasn't
Hmm.
actually assigned to a housing technically,
Okay.
right? So that's just
Okay.
where they held me like a way station almost. But
Hmm.
in there wasn't that many. I mean, but when I went to Ironwood, yeah, on my yard, I'm probably like 40 to 50 homies. Like, and this is all others. It's not just Chinese people, you know.
Right.
I think on my
Right.
yard there was maybe maybe 4 or 5 Chinese people. And then there was a lot of Vietnamese, like 20, 30 of them, maybe 7, 8 Samoans, whatever. So yeah, it was just a mixture of people. Mhm.
And outside of the others, what will the overall population of Ironwood?
I think it
Is it
was,
Ironwood?
yeah, Ironwood State Prison. Mhm. It was
So,
the same thing, about 2,000, so maybe
mhm.
2,500.
So out of 2,500 people, um, the others of which you'd be a part of
Mhm.
is less than 500 people.
Definitely less than 500. Yeah, I would say probably all the yards combined would be no more than 100, and that's different A, B, C, Alpha, Bravo, A, B, C, D, basically all those yards.
So how does now this is not YA. This is not kids now. This is you guys are kids. You were a kid, but you were in there with grown predators. How do you manage those politics?
You just stick to the car. Believe it or not, the car dynamic really shifts because whether you're a kid or not, if they can't actively disrespect me because that would cause a race right. So again, it's just a lot of politicking that kind of protects people and gets people into trouble, but there's also times where you're young and then you have a cellmate. Your cellie usually laces you up again, teaches you the
Mhm.
ropes. This is where these are the phones that you can't use, these are the showers you can't use, microwave. They give you the rules and they call them regulars, right? Rules and regulations. So yeah, and once you fit in, I mean, it takes time to kind of get, I guess, in the flow of things. But
Mhm.
at the end of the day, like everybody conforms. You have to. There's just no way to escape the politics.
How much of a psychological burden is that? Because a lot of it is nonsensical bullshit. And you got
Yeah.
half a mind, you like, this is a bunch of stupid shit, but
Yeah.
I have to go along with it. Like,
Yeah.
how impactful is that on you psychologically and emotionally?
I think in the beginning it was kind of rough because you're like, okay, I can't beat up this dude because he's from my like enemy gang. We got to be cool, even though I know he shot at my homie, and this is a
Right.
chance to get him. But later on, it just becomes normal because, like I had mentioned, as you start to talk to them, as you start to see these people carry the way they carry themselves is different. Some people are still, actively looking like they're big bad or whatever, but most prisoners carry themselves the way I carry myself, even now. Very calm, very respectful. They say things like, oh, excuse me. If they walk by you, excuse me. You know,
Try.
sorry, sir. And if they want to holler at you, they don't ever disrespect you in front of people. Oh, let me holler at you on the side. Like, okay, cool. Away from all the politics, you guys chop it up like grown men. So when I saw that, it was different than seeing people on the streets who was walking around with their head up, like, like who want to mess with me. It wasn't like that.
Right.
Everyone was respectful. And I was like, I like it like this, So
Right.
yeah.
Now, that's interesting. Um, because in the street, it's much more of a free for all. There's a lot more room to run, right? A lot more people to hide behind,
Right.
especially under the circumstances of being an Asian or something other than a Hispanic or a melanated person. It's like you have to learn to comport yourself because it's not about being tough now. It's about being smart. Um, the psychological impact, the whole thing about you not trusting any other person's ideas or thoughts but your own, and that stuff started early in your life, didn't
Yes.
it? Very early. What do you attribute that too, that attitude of I can only trust my own ideas, I can only trust my own thoughts. I can't really allow people to influence me.
I think the fact that um just my father being the way he was probably a huge impact. But even after that, we had no relation. Our relationship was non-existent. So I guess that, but he was a springboard, if you will, to me really trusting and believing in myself, right? But again, it's kind of confusing too, because some of my homies, their parents were the same way. They were, had an alcoholic father, but he never joined a gang. I have a friend who never really trusted him. He would literally say, "I don't trust myself. Like, I don't know." And he was very like just go with the flow type of dude. He accepted people's words for what he was, like, kind of gullible and then almost easily manipulated
Hmm.
and naive. But this guy, actually, I thought, who I really looked down upon back in the day, like, "Man, this guy's dumb. He don't have a good head on his shoulders." But he ended up living a better life than me. So for me personally, like, I feel like I just always thought I was right. Like, there was something in me that was like, "Nah, you know what you know." And people don't know. They've never been through what you've been through. So you can't listen to anybody but you. Do you understand what I'm saying? And when I did that, I did everything I wanted to do. Want to hit a lick? Hit a lick. Want to do this? Do that. Want to do drugs? Do drugs. But I remember the homie was like, you know, what if, like, I remember walking through the apartments, like, what if we get, like, what if I become, so a drug dealer hit us up, right? He was like, "You guys want some weed?" And I was like, "Hell yeah, shoot it." This was when I was young. And my homie was like, "But what if we get addicted?" And, like, that sounded so crazy to me. So I looked at the drug dealer and we literally laughed at him. We're like, "Bro, this guy's a weenie." Like, what's like, we were just making fun of him. And he felt humiliated. He walked away, but he never did the drugs. Later on, he now works for Deloitte, graduated Cal Berkeley, all that. Yeah.
Wow.
And I'm like,
Wow.
yeah, it seems like, oh, well, he didn't do drugs. No, it's not the fact that he didn't do drugs. He
Yeah.
was able to say, like, "I don't know if I'm gonna get addicted, and I don't know if I won't. So I'm not even gonna touch it." Whereas I was like, "I'm not gonna get addicted." Mind you, I'm seeing crackheads at this time. There's still crack and all this, crackheads on the streets strung out. And I'm like, "Oh, I'm stronger than them." 12-year-old
Mm,
kid thinking like,
mm,
"I'm not gonna be like them." But because of that, I touched those drugs. You understand what I'm saying? And that he was like, "I don't want to be like them. So I'm not
mm.
going to touch them." And then when he distrusted himself, he didn't touch those drugs, and he really lived a better life. Somebody I looked down upon, somebody I thought was lame, lived better than me and is making more money, taking care of his family, has kids, has, a wife, living much happier than I am. And that one little thing, I really feel like, is the only thing. He grew up in the same hood, same struggles, same everything. But the difference was his heart was really different than mine. His mindset, his perspective was way different than mine. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It was, no two people are impacted the same way by the same stimuli.
Right.
You know what I mean? Um, a lot of what you experience, I mean, it's textbook, dysfunctional family dynamic. The self-destructive behavior, the um, lack of self-value, which manifests in reckless behavior, which in youth culture looks like bravery and toughness,
Right.
which is rewarded, and any behavior that's rewarded is repeated. Um, and it's just all these really textbook dynamics, impacting your mindset, but they had a lot to do with your survival as well, because your parents obviously weren't very well suited for the development of another human being,
Mm.
you know, if you don't mind my saying. But it's like I say it because I know that you are aware of it, because I've watched hours and hours and hours of it, right?
Right.
Um, so the point, and I don't know. I'm not going to say what the point is. I'm gonna ask you what the point is. What is the point of you sharing your experiences the way you have been relatively recent to me, on these various platforms. What what is it that you seek to get out of it?
So for me personally, like, is just kind of paying it forward. Like now I'm doing prison ministry. So I feel
Mhm.
like if people shared this side, what I've been through, this what I call emptiness, this hole in the heart. If I knew this prior to, like, someone was speaking the way I was and explaining the concept of sin, the concept of trusting in yourselves, the dynamic of the gangs, right? The way I kind of dumb it down in a simple term, I think it would have stopped me from doing a lot of the things that I did. You know what I mean?
Hey,
So I aim to just kind of do that. And it really, like, when I meet people speaking at conferences, I was in Korea speaking at post consulates and, speaking to ministers of youth from different countries. Like, it makes me realize that, there's a youth problem everywhere. Like, it's not just in LA, it's not just in the San Gabriel Valley. People are just empty and feeling sad all the time. And for me, what I gain from that is essentially, from a Christian standpoint, spreading the gospel, but also from a personal standpoint, like helping people that kind of like really need it, and giving them the actual help from the inside out, from the core, rather than just giving people money and housing. And like, if people think the way that I think on a godly perspective, let's say, then I don't think there would be that much hate in this world. I think there would be more peace. And when people are peaceful, then everything heals. Everybody heals. You know what I mean? So yeah.
yeah, yeah. The the Christian component of your story is, I would think, to most people, pretty unexpected and,
Mhm.
just kind of like, surprising as I don't know what, because you were definitely, like king of the knucklehead. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Par for the course, though.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you had a lot of contemporaries, no doubt,
Yeah.
for sure. Um, so how does that happen? How does the religion thing come about
Mhm.
in
So
your life?
it started with my mom. My mom was Buddhist, born, Taoist Buddhist, really hardcore, basically. And she had not just me, but my brother in prison too. So she believed, doing good karma would bring good deeds. But she's like, why is it that my kids are so bad? Like, my mom has spent all her life like trying to be good. And so she would talk to the monks, and but no one really gave her a anecdote as to why your kids are the way they are, why your husband is the way he is, although you lived your whole life being chill, being respectful. My mom, my father is her first. She's never had anyone else. Like, she's
Oh,
always been very just like even keel. But it's just her whole world is so like crazy. And the monks couldn't explain that to her, honestly. So
really?
yeah, she started to, this church, it kind of just fell into her lap because she also didn't want to go to church. And, she's from Korea, where in Korea, there's a lot of culty churches. She's seen that growing up. So she was always turned off by that. Like, they just want your money. The people are selling their homes to donate to these pastors. It's just
Wow.
crazy. So she was like, she never really looked into Christianity church, but she was a piano teacher. And
Yeah.
one time, her one of her clients had kids that was, learning from her and getting lessons. And then that lady was part of the church that I'm now part of, that she's now part of. And the lady just came and was like, talking about how happy she was and how her kids are listening. And then she was just like, well, how did you get your kids to listen? Because nobody wants to teach piano. Like, she doesn't really teach piano to kids. She was teaching them to adults. And how are your kids? Like, they're the best kids. They listen well, they're respectful, they don't complain, they do their homework, this and this and that. So she was like, actually, it was through God. And then my mom was kind of off put by that. But actually, as she started hanging out with this lady more, she did realize that this girl had been through a lot. That woman was raped. That woman was, sex trafficked. It was like pretty crazy. She didn't, but then when you look at her, she had like this inner peace. So that drew my mom to her more. Like, what is it? And then started going to church, and she learned all of this stuff. And that pastor um, ended up, we had a run and I met with him, and this was after my friend got murdered. This was after my homie who committed suicide and, hung himself in jail. This was after another freeway to freeway shooting when my homie got shot in the head and, was murdered. All of that happened at this precise time, and my mom's car had broken down. So I went from there to, take my mom, which she was in San Bernardino at the time, drove all the way to San Bernardino back down to like Koreatown area. So, you know, right then and there, I meet the pastor and he explains everything to me. He explains, first thing he said was, it talks about the sin, what is sin? And I'm like, sin is being evil, doing evil things, lying, cheating, stealing, murdering. Yes, I'm a sinner because I did that. So what's your point? And I was a little kind of like apprehensive, but he came in such a very non-condemning way. He was like, what you're thinking about it is not so. It's not like the full thing. You're getting half of it, The truth is sin is inherited to us. So he started utilizing analogies, which nobody broke down. Now, I was in prison. There was chaplains. There was, people who were Mormon or whoever, like Protestants. They would come in. They would come and try to evangelize to us. They would volunteer their time. But a lot of the times I would ask them questions like, well, if there is this heaven that you're talking about, why is there so much chaos in this world? And how do I know I'm going to be there? Because I done did stuff that you don't know about. And I know I got to answer for those things. So how do you, and they're like, oh, you shouldn't have done those things. Number one. Number two, you need to stop doing those types of things when you get out, because the more good deeds you do outweighs the bad deeds. And I would even say, well, let's say I kill somebody. So I smoke this dude. And if I keep doing good, that doesn't bring him back. You understand? Like, it doesn't outweigh the action. And then
Mhm.
they would never have an answer for that.
Mhm.
They're like, well, God is love. And I'm like, well, that doesn't mean it. I'm asking you a specific question. Does it bring people? I would challenge them. But this pastor, he explained the sin to me. He's like, yes, murdering people obviously is a sin, he said, Johnny. But the problem is, people don't just wake up and murder people, right? He said they have murderous thoughts, and the thoughts influence the way they feel. The way
Yep.
they feel influences the way they behave.
Yep.
So he said, Johnny, you have been around a lot of self trust, believing in yourself. But he said, let me ask you something, do you want to be depressed? And I'm like, no. Do you want to be empty? And I'm like, no. Why are you empty? Why are you depressed? I'm like, I don't. He's like, because the thought is coming in telling you that you're depressed. Would you agree? And I'm like, yeah, that's true. He's like, so you don't want to be empty and depressed, but why is this thought coming? It's not your thought. And then he started to explain the thought process that was dragging me to do evil things. So I was like, oh shoot. So he explained basically deep thinking and overthinking in such a simple term, in a simple way for me. And then he talked about sin and basically saying that it was inherited. You're Chinese, you didn't choose to be Chinese. You were born that way, right? Your father was Chinese, his father was Chinese. Likewise, if you believe in Christianity, he said, and he even put it like that, the world was made from two people, Adam and Eve, right? Logically speaking, it doesn't make sense, but hear me out, he said, right? When they sinned, it was passed down to them. Do you understand? Like their children. So would you say you're born perfect? And I was like, no. And he's like, why can't you be born perfect? You know? And then I was just like, I don't know. Right. And he's like, because it was inherited to you. Like, you don't choose to be Chinese, just like you didn't choose to be imperfect. It's part of you. We're flawed naturally, and that's sin. You can, basically being imperfect. And I was like, okay. So he started to put it in that way. And I understood it, after that. And he's like, so you're normal. That's the first time I ever heard anybody tell me that I was normal. You're normal. You're being angry, being frustrated, trusting yourself, following your thoughts, all that is a normal thing. The problem is you didn't know that. So you're trying to be good, he said. When you try to be good, you're an imperfect person trying to be perfect. How can you not fail? And I was like, oh, shoot. So I'm failing not because I didn't try. It's like, you're not failing because you didn't try hard. You probably tried. The issue is you didn't realize that you're already broken as a person. You're already flawed, and that you'll never receive perfection. That's why he said in other religions, they tell you to do it. You know, you got to be good. You got to do good deeds. You got to, whatever. And he's like, I'm not saying that's wrong. But the issue is Christianity, true Christians believe that you cannot do it without an external power helping you. You understand, which is God. So I was like, oh, he's like, the reason you live that way is because you don't know about God. You don't care about God. And that's okay because that's normal. So it just, everything he came at me, it was speaking at the core of my heart. I never told anyone I was empty. I didn't even know that I was empty. I just thought that that feeling was normal and everybody felt this way, and we just all had to go through it. And that's what life was. But then there was a part of me that was like, why is my mom peaceful? Even though she gets beat, Section 8, and no money and two horrible kids, came for the American dream, ended up being an American nightmare. It's like, but at the end of the day, she had that inner peace that I wanted so bad, and I didn't have that. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
That was very good. That was very, very good. And I've watched you kind of share different components of what you just shared, and that was very good. I think for a person like myself, I'm not religious at all. Gangsterism was my religion.
Yeah.
So the tenets of that, the morals, ethics, and all the structure of that's what I grew up on. And it served me, because I believed in it. And that is the power of belief. You can believe in a rock, and whatever you imbue that rock with, if you believe that rock's ability to subsist in your existence and provide, whatever it is that you've imbued that rock with, or you come to believe that that rock has the capability of bringing forth in your life, then that will manifest,
Yeah.
and that, not to take anything away from, any religious beliefs or anything like that, but to say that belief in itself, in and of itself, is a powerful, powerful thing. And that's what I take away from what you just shared.
Absolutely.
You currently, I think you said you currently minister inside prisons.
Yes.
Yeah, that's dope. Tell us about that. I had a prison education program. Actually, I used to be in the prison 12 hours a day, 10 days, 5 days a week, 12 hours a day. Teaching critical thinking.
That's awesome.
And it's a very rewarding, very, very rewarding experience, because you're dealing with people who will, they need, for certain, regardless of what a person out here in the world is doing, for certain the person in there is dealing with having had some significant issues with comporting themselves, and that is why they've been removed from society.
Right.
All right. So this is a person who absolutely, beyond a shadow of their doubt or yours, needs this insight, and that they're in a position where they're ready to receive it in most instances because of where they are. It's like kind of hard to deny the reality, right?
Right.
No, I'm good. No, you're not, motherfucker. You said that, brother.
Right.
You got something fucked up, So, tell us about the prison ministry, and how it works and how you work it.
So we go to different prisons. We have contracts with them. We have sponsors that bring us into the prisons. What we teach is this thing called mind education, right? So where our thoughts and our heart intersect is called mind, right? It's mind education. So we teach people about the world of the heart. We teach people about the mindset. All of this is actually derived from the Bible. They know that we're a Christian organization, but the way we go there is it's not preachy. We don't like preach to people. What we talk about is like some simple analogies of apple tree, of electricity, for example. We use these little like simple analogies for people to resonate, because not everyone in those classes are Christian. Some of them are Catholic,
Right.
Some of them are Buddhist. I have people who are Muslim. You know what I mean? So what I attack with these things is like how I teach these classes is that it's centered around the emptiness that we feel inside of our hearts. This up and down lifestyle. We call it in Christianity sin and repentance lifestyle. It's like you sin, repent until you die, right? But how I dumbed it down was you're happy, sad, happy, sad, happy, sad. We're trying to get people to be on a wavelength of overcoming everything, regardless of being happy or sad. Do you understand what I mean? So
Key.
yeah, so because life is going to throw you curveballs, but if you don't fortify this heart to overcome things, you will eventually, any little thing will knock you down, right? So we're
Facts.
teaching people through the Bible, through mind education, how to fortify this heart to overcome everything, and I give examples. I talk about my mom who had pancreatic cancer. I talk about, how she overcame it when they gave her only 7 months to live, and that was 6 years ago. I mean, how she was able to overcome that. We talk about things like how case studies of how kids overcome autism. There's a kid who had an
I
IQ
know
of,
one.
yeah, yeah. There's a
I
kid
do. I
who
know
had
one.
50 IQ of 50, a little bit above a dolphin. And they said, he's never gonna, doctors diagnosed him. He's never gonna, get out of a fourth grade level education. And this kid is now at, University of Seoul, Korea. And he's,
Wow.
yeah, he's won numerous medals in swimming. I mean, he's living a better life than me, and he's technically autistic, so we teach about these things. The situation does not define who we are. Situations, the good thing about situations is that they always change. A person can't always be unhappy, and a person can't always be happy. So to learn how to nest in that balance of overcoming things when things are bad and enjoying things when things are good, that's what we're teaching, this balance in life. And that's what really kind of, through Soft White Underbelly, through Hood Stocks, through these different podcasts that I'm on, I'm pushing that message of hope. But hope comes from that stability, from that
That's right.
maintenance mindset,
I
so
agree.
yeah. Mhm.
I agree. I absolutely agree. Um, you had before you go, there was something uh that I wasn't going to ask you about, but in light of what you shared about your experience with your prison ministry as an ordained minister, as I understand it.
Mhm.
Congratulations on
Thank you.
that. Um, you had a friend write you a letter. He was in prison,
In
and he
jail.
told you
Jail. Yeah.
that he was thinking about killing himself. Yeah,
Hmm.
and 3 days after you got that letter, he did kill himself.
Yeah.
Uh, how much of an impact on your ultimately coming to where you've come to as an ordained minister teaching inside prisons do you think that experience had on your on that decision?
100%. I think it was the most influential because he, like, I feel like if I knew what I knew now, like the lessons that I learned, the analogies that, like, getting to people's core of the heart, the core issue of this depression that he was feeling, of this loneliness, of this self-trust he had built up, I think I could have saved him, honestly. And that's something I always regret. I don't tell people, I don't share that, but and that's why I push forward constantly this message of sanctification, of not trusting our thoughts. You know what I mean? All the time, because they could be wrong. There's a lot of intrusive and destructive thoughts that we have that aren't ours. They're very foreign. But,
That's right.
my friend who, hung himself, he, you know, he was always a happy kid. It was crazy. Like, when I would have never thought of all people, he would do that. And my homies who know him would attest to this, who watch this. They know what's up. Like, he was a very known person in LA, and rest his soul, but he was always happy. He was always a solid individual, loved everybody. He taught me how to make my first French toast. Like, he was just a
Oh
big
no.
bro type of vibe, like a nurturer. But this man killed himself, and it always makes me sad because it's like, what happened? And even till this day, a lot of people don't know, but I understand what happened, knowing what I know now, understanding
Man.
that he was isolated, understanding that when you're alone, right? I would have explained to him, like, there's a lot of people I meet now in prison who come up to me and go, Johnny, I have suicidal thoughts. I feel like I have nowhere to go. I want to talk to you about. They'll pull me to the side, and I'll give them like the anecdote. I said, let's think about when you have suicidal thoughts. And they go, okay. And I say, it's usually when you're alone. And they're like, oh, that's true. I said, when you're isolated, when you're laying on your bunk at night, your cellie's knocked out and you're in your thoughts. You might have did your upside down push-ups. You might have did your calisthenics burpees and all that. Your body is physically tired, but your mind starts to race. You can't go to sleep, right? So I start explaining this, and then I tell them, you know, if you think about it, it starts with a very small thought. Oh, I'm lonely. And then from I'm lonely turns into, what am I doing with my life? And then random flashbacks will come where you cheated on somebody or beat somebody or did something or drank or did some shameful thing. And you're like, man, what the heck was I thinking? Man, I'm nothing. And it just, nothing is happening around you, but in your mind, it's just snowballing. And now all of a sudden you got tears down your face. You don't want to live anymore and this and this and that. And then they're like, that's impactful. That's what happened to my homie for sure. Because what he was writing in the letter was that it started with, hey, bro, hope you're doing well. I don't know. I just feel off. And then and it's a straight like 6-7 page letter writing
Yeah.
about in code, but writing essentially like I'm empty. When I see you, I'll see you in the mountains and, just stuff like that. Basically, like I'm going to do what I'm going to do and always think about me because I'm your homie and I'm going to watch over you and this and that. And I was just like shocked, but anyway, so what I tell people is those thoughts are not your thoughts. Like if I'm walking, for example, and I walk by a Foot Locker and, I walk a little past the Foot Locker, I'm like, oh, shoot, these are my legs. I'm in control of them. I should be able to stop, turn back around, backtrack. You understand?
That's right.
But let's say like I'm walking and I'm like, okay, there's a Foot Locker, but there's another force that's pushing me, whether it's a car or somebody, and I don't know it. I can't go back. Then I'm no longer in control. Likewise, I said, when it comes to your thoughts, if they're your thoughts, these negative thoughts, right when you say, I'm done thinking about them, right then and there, it should stop. But the issue is whenever we say, okay, I'm not going to think about it, it keeps coming. Then it is no longer your thoughts. There's a evil spirit, a destructive spirit that's pouring this into you. Understand? And then that's when people start to realize like, oh, it's not me. That's right. Because you don't want to commit suicide. You don't want to be sad. Who wants to be sad? We always try to think positively. But why is it that these negative thoughts come? It's not from us. It's a different force. People don't see that. They don't believe that. But that's something that when I teach to these prisoners, they come up to me after this lesson all the time. I talk about the intrusive, destructive thoughts. They shake my hand and they're like, Johnny, I literally deal with that almost every day.
Mhm.
And no one has ever laced me down in that way where it's like, it's not mine. And I give them the tools to kind of fight that. When it comes, let's say you're lonely, I tell them, think about, are you really lonely? Yeah, you're in prison, it's lonely. But even in prison, you're around people who you can, speak to. You have letters you can write, you have phone time. Some people got cell phones in there illegally, but they got them. You can call anybody. Maybe physically you are, but if you think about all the positive, just think a little deeper, you're not a lonely person. People are still sending you packages. They're still out there waiting for you. People love you. When you think about this stuff compared to that little thought, I'm lonely, you're able to overcome that. And then people are like, oh, you're right, Johnny, you're right. So because we're not deep thinkers, that's the problem. We think we're deep thinkers, but we're overthinkers. There's a difference. Deep thinking is empathetic at its core.
That's
You're
right.
always hopeful when you think deeply. Oh, that's where okay, now next time I got this. And it gives you hope because you can move different now. Overthinking is always negative at the core. When you're sitting there and you're like, I'm lonely, man, I'm so stupid. Yeah, I'm dumb. I'm not going to try this again. I'm not going to do this ever again. When you start doing that, it starts to snowball. So let's shift from overthinking to deep thinking. And then people just change, bro. These inmates are changing. They come to our classes. They really change from the inside out. I'm not giving them money. I'm not sending them books. I'm not sneaking in stuff for them. What I give them is hope inside of their heart to cast out the despair that they're feeling.
That is an awesome, awesome gift to be giving and to have received.
Amen.
All right. Bless upon you, man. Blessings upon you, brother. For real, for real. Thank you for everything you do. Thank you for your participation here today and everything that you've given. And, keep doing what you do, man.
Thank you,
And
bro.
I'm definitely going to connect with you.
Yeah,
For sure, for sure. Got a lot of things that we can impact together for sure.
let's do it.
All right, I'm looking forward to it, man.
For sure.
Thank you. And that was an excellent interview, Johnny Chang.
Thank you.
Thank you, man, and VladTV. Appreciate you.
Shut up.
All right. Peace.